Hello. Well, this is going to be a little bit of a different podcast episode than the other ones in the sense that I'm going to essentially just combine all the tips I have across all the writing topics into one big episode. So I think without wasting any more time, let's just start with the first tip. This first tip is going to be aimed at speeding up your writing process. Now you're gonna bear with me for a little bit because when I present this tip to you, you're gonna be like, you're ridiculous, you're insane, you're crazy. It's never gonna speed up my process. But trust me, it will. So the tip is called improv writing. Now what is improv writing? Well, to put it simply, it's writing without a clear plan in mind. You get on your computer, you open up Final Draft. What other screenplay softwares are there again? I know I use a Scenarist. There's Final Draft, there's Screenever. I forgot the other ones. But you open up your screenplay writing software, or if you write novels, you open up Word, Google Docs, whatever. And then you just start writing. Just whatever's coming to your mind, whatever narrative is coming to your mind, start writing it. Whatever dialogue is there, pull it down. Now, when I tell you this, you're going to be like, oh my God, you are ridiculously insane. How on earth do you plan to ever write faster with this method? How can you do something fast when you don't have a plan? Well, in most scenarios, it's true. If you start a business without a plan, it's very slow. But the thing about writing is it's not like a business. When you start writing and then you stop writing, there really are no consequences there. You can start and stop whenever you feel like it. So this is the beauty of writing. There are no risks to stopping or starting it. So just improv it. Because the thing is, no one's going to see this improv. You write your improv session, they don't have to read it because you might look at it and change it later on. But this is why it's important. When you improv write it, you will get past that initial stage of not having anything written. If you just start your day off and you haven't wrote anything yet, it will be a kickstart to start writing more and more. Or if you're stuck on a scene and you don't have a plan to move forward, improv it, and it'll maybe bring a source of inspiration as you write your, unpracticed dialogue. So this jump start is often the hardest thing writers face. They don't know how to just start writing. They don't know maybe how to start a scene or to just begin the process, and improv writing is going to help speed that up by giving you that head start. Another thing it's going to do is it's going to flesh out the story more because it ends up becoming almost like two drafts. Let me explain. When you improv write, you're never probably going to submit that one as your final version. Even when I do this trick, the first time I basically improv all my dialogue, I am never going to use that as my final thing. I'm not just going to say, okay, this is good, let's move on. I'm going to go back, I'm going to look at it, and I'm going to say, okay, this part was good, and this part was kind of mid. This part is mid, let's remove it, and this part was horrible. But this part right here, ooh, this is fantastic. This could be really good right here. So you start fleshing out these moments, and you realize what part you wrote right, what part you wrote wrong, and then you go back and fix those. You're not doing too detailed stuff, but you go back and fix those. And when you do that, you essentially kind of created a second draft that has looked over the mistakes of the first draft. So by the time you go on to your quote-unquote real second draft, you already have a really nice first draft to work with, and you can flesh out the story on a deeper layer. The next thing it's going to do, improv writing, is help improve this dialogue. Sometimes we have planned scenes, but the way we talk oftentimes, especially humans, I don't know why I said especially humans, but whatever. The way we talk most of the time in most scenarios is unpracticed. Unless we're giving a speech, like we're on a TED Talk or something, or we're at a job and we have to give a presentation to somebody, most of the time, we don't know what we're going to say next. We're kind of winging it. Even though it feels like it, we are winging it. I'm sure you've noticed this. You come up in your head, you think, okay, I'm going to talk about, and then you insert like a general idea, right? I'm going to talk about this, this, and this. And then when you come to say it, you cannot even say that at all, right? It's like, whoa, what am I talking about anymore, right? Today we're going to talk about the logistics of why my potato farms aren't growing. What? See? It gets confusing when you have just this general idea and you need to convert it to a dialogue because it's too general. And oftentimes that's what planning is. These are the big, broad ideas, something you can find on like a Wikipedia summary, but they're not the very specifics of the thing that go into the writing process, which is dialogue is an important specific thing that doesn't just come from a planned page, okay? You have to actually think about and write detailed dialogue. And improvised writing will create that detailed dialogue because you are speaking it and you are acting it. And you will understand whether certain dialogue works and whether certain dialogue has flaws in it. For example, let's say you write a crucial argument scene between two characters, right? And your description is just, oh, they're mad at each other. One of the characters is trying to calm down the situation while the other one is escalating it. And you have that, but like it's like, well, okay, what are you going to write with that? You improv dialogue it. You start with your rough lines, and then you create something out of that rough line. After you create those rough lines, you get essentially your fleshed out argument between the two characters, and you will understand that some parts of this argument seem too generic because some parts of this argument look like just a big summary of it, whereas some dialogue feel like this is a part of what we're talking about. We aren't just, I guess the best way I can describe to you is they're not just looking at each other and say, hey, we are arguing, I am mad at you, because that's what a summary would say. That's what like your plan might say. They're like, hey, I am trying to calm you down. Like, that's what your plan might say. But you have to find a different way to say that when you actually start writing the dialogue. And improv dialogue is going to help you do that. So that's my first tip right there, improv writing. My second tip to you is focus on the bigger picture. This completely contradicts everything I just said with improvised writing, where it's like you have the bigger picture, but you can't really do anything with the bigger picture because you don't know how to start it, and you don't have the specificity of it. Now I'm telling you, forget the specificity, think of the bigger picture. Except I'm not telling you that. When I tell you to think of the bigger picture, I want you to think of the final product. If it's a screenplay, think of the movie. And if it's a book, think of the world. Okay? It sounds really easy to do. I mean, you'd be like, an author will be like, oh, yeah, I think of my characters. I have a vivid description of my world all the time. But when you're actually writing down the words, you're only looking them as words. They don't appear as anything else to you. So, whenever you're writing it down, have this clear image of what your characters look like. Have this clear description of the setting, what the ambiance is. For me, I write all my novels as if there was a film, okay? So I start thinking about, okay, what are the elements of a film? Okay, one, there's the shot. All right, so here's a problem. I can't do the shot directly in a novel because the shot is an element strictly for screenplay, but how can I incorporate the shot in a novel? Okay, when you do a different type of shot in a screenplay, you are limiting what is being able to see, or you might be encompassing everything in a thing. So you're either limiting or bringing everything in, and based on that, you can write the description. Okay, maybe I'm just focusing on someone's eyes. Okay, in that novel translation of it would be having maybe a paragraph about somebody's eyes, the way they look, the way they're moving around, or something important about them. What's else there? Okay, there's sound. I feel like a lot of times sound is neglected because oftentimes we only think of sounds as like onomatopoeia. But there's so many other sounds you can create. With the forest, you can create twigs breaking, leaves rattling, wind. If it's a car chase, the engine, brake, the sounds of tires squeaking under braking, right? Helicopters, cop sirens. Start thinking about the sound. Okay, what's next? Music. Music is very interesting. For me, I always wanted to incorporate music into my stories, and oftentimes I know many writers write while listening to music. So we already have music in the back of our heads when we're writing our stories. Why not incorporate that into our stories? One way could be either explicitly placing music. For example, in my screenplay, 7 Days to Save Copacabana, that I just wrote, it explicitly plays Copacabana, but I was allowed to do that because it's a film. How can you incorporate music in a novel? Okay, maybe you have a singer character. Okay, maybe you don't want to go down that route of having someone specifically sing it. Maybe you can describe sounds. They're in a theater. Classical music is playing Beethoven, violins, pianos. Start describing that. What kind of music? Is it dark, or is it a more cheerful tone? Is it harmonized? Is there a solo playing? Is there reverb? Those type of things you can include. So when you're thinking about the bigger picture, I'm not talking about the grand scale of something. I'm talking about the finished product, where everything is considered. Not just the words, not just the dialogue, not just the chapters, but everything combined that creates the experience that the readers want to have. They want to hear these sounds as they're reading it. They want to envision these settings as they're reading them. So when you start thinking about these bigger picture things, these finalized things, you will create a lot more detailed and more unique writing. For example, like I said with sound, I haven't read a lot of books, but of the books I've read, not a lot of them use music as a very big element, or just an element at all. And music is something interesting you could play with. So that is a very interesting tip to delve with. All right, let's move on to tip number 3. Now, tip number 3 isn't a tip, but more so like a writing practice. Something you can incorporate to help develop your writing skills. So the tip is as follows. Go to your favorite movie, favorite TV show, or whatever franchise it is, okay? Make sure that thing has a screenplay, okay? So mostly stick with movies and TV shows. Short films are fine as long as you can find the screenplay of it, but find something and watch it. Okay, the first time I want you to watch it just for fun. All right? The second time I want you to watch it for specific details. Okay? Look at how the characters are dressed. Look at the way they look. Look at the different camera angles. Okay? Look at where they are, the setting. Don't just look at the specific things the two main characters are doing or whatever the main character is. Look in the background. What's happening in the background? Pay attention to the music. What's the music like? Any sound effects I should pay attention to? Start paying attention to those things. And then write that scene, okay? Open up your software, whether it's a novel or a screenplay. Doesn't matter which one it is. Open up that software and write that scene you just watched, okay? And after writing out that scene, I want you to go back and watch that scene again and think, okay, did I get it accurate or not? Okay, if there's anything you missed out, go back and add it into the paragraph. So at this point, you've watched the thing 3 times. All right, you watched the thing 3 times, and you have written the scene. Okay, now I want you to pull up the actual screenplay of that film or TV show and compare it to what you wrote. This is, again, like I said, primarily a screenplay tip because it'll be an easier one-to-one connection to see, okay, my screenplay that I wrote based off this scene versus the actual thing. It's easier to see than like a screenplay versus a novel, but you can still do it. Still open up that script and see what was the actual script that the actors had to work with versus what I wrote. Now, they could be completely different. And that's all right, okay? Sometimes they can be completely different and both be good. Your version could be just as good, if not better, as the other one, even though it's completely different. The main point is I want you to focus on what somebody in the industry who has written and published writes like. What did they have in mind when they wrote this scene, and how did they write it? And you will get a fair evaluation on your writing style and how you write scenes versus how they write scenes. So I guess it might help to pick a scene similar to the style or genre of writing you do, because then it'll be even more similar. You can realize, okay, these are both horror writings. Okay, his horror writing is like this. Okay, maybe I can incorporate some of the way he wrote it because I don't really like the way I wrote this part. Or maybe you can be like, I like the way I wrote this part, or you included something he didn't. Whatever it is, compare the screenplays and figure out what was different and learn from it. Because at the end of the day, these guys are professionals and are in the industry for a reason. Unless the movie was Morbius, then in that case, I don't know why they're in the industry. And Madam Web, I don't know why they're in the industry. But other than that, these guys are professionals and in the industry for a reason. So study from them. You don't have to know them. You don't have to go to film festivals to connect with people, though I'm not saying you shouldn't. That's a great ring. Go to book festivals, film festivals, whatever. But you don't have to, like, have these people's phone numbers or, emails so you can be like, hey, I want to do an interview with you and I want to learn with you and yada yada. You don't have to do that because a lot of people don't have the luxury to be able to be contacted or be in contact with these people. You have free resources online that can help you compare your writing style. One thing, I think there was, I don't know if it was an official study or if it was just something I learned in English class. Writers, they looked at young developing writers, they looked at their favorite writers' writing styles, and they studied their writing styles, and they tried to mimic it. They took a paragraph from someone like Kafka or someone like Edgar Allan Poe, and they tried to literally mimic that exact style, but with like a different content, right? So it's like you have one sentence, you copy the sentence structure, but you change what it's about, the topic of the story. You take a paragraph, you take every sentence, and you take every single sentence structure of that sentence, that same order, but change the content. And they learned that when these young writers copy and mimic these writing styles, not only do they get better at writing, but throughout the way, they start developing their own writing style because they've understood the writing style they're mimicking and now can utilize bits and pieces of it in their own writing. So that's why I wanted to tell you to go out and look at published work and study it. It'll help you improve. And the point of it is not to steal exactly how they write, but if you mimic their style of writing enough, you will be able to take pieces of their writing and incorporate it into your own. It's like collecting the Infinity Stones, essentially. It's like, okay, I got Nolan's writing style, I got Tarantino, I got Kubrick, and so on and so forth. It's basically connecting the Infinity Stones to develop your own writing style. All right. Final tip for this video, probably. This will concern creating conflict. Oftentimes people will tell you, oftentimes an understatement, almost all the time people will tell you, the stakes need to keep rising. As you progress the story, the danger element needs to be present at all times, and it needs to keep rising. It can't be like start of the story, you're saving the planet from being exploded, and then this halfway through you're trying to stop a bank robber. I think I've mentioned this example before, but yeah, you can't have these stakes be in a wild order. It has to keep progressing. But how do we even create conflict? How do we create these stakes for these characters to, battle against? Well, one way to do this is work backwards. Find out what the absolute pinnacle of these dangers are. What is the final boss that these characters will encounter? And then work your way back from this. Maybe you already know your main villain, and you're like, okay, that's the final guy they're going to fight. Okay, let's move backwards. What's going to happen from here? What's going to happen from here? And then what's going to happen to the star, and yada yada. For example, let's take The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight, the final conflict Batman encountered. I'm going to use the Joker for this. I'm not going to use Harvey Dent because technically that was the final battle. But the final encounter that Batman encountered was the Joker at who basically tried to distract Batman from Harvey Dent. And he wasn't going to kill him, but he was trying to distract Batman from Harvey Dent long enough and also try to showcase that the people are just as evil and corrupted as he are by doing the whole two boat things. One is full of civilians, one is full of prisoners, and if one person decides to blow up the other boat, they get to live, but if both people decide to blow up the boat, they both blow up. So that's what happened. That is the pinnacle. That is the final stake. The final stake is potential innocent people getting killed. And hundreds, thousands of them. I don't know how much that boat actually fit, but thousands of them. And that was the final showing. Okay? Now let's work backward from here. How are we going to do this, okay? Well, before that, we started with smaller mobsters. Okay? That's the start of Joker's thing. He started by getting rid of these small mobsters that looked like they were going to play an important role in the movie, but they didn't because the Joker took care of them. And as he progressed, he started doing worse and worse crimes. He took Harvey Dent and Rachel, killed Rachel. He, blew up the hospital. He threatened to kill, I forgot the guy's name, but the guy who was going to expose that Bruce Wayne is actually Batman. But he threatened to kill him. And he kept working his way up until he reached the Batman himself. So that's how Nolan developed stakes. He started small and he developed his way up to Batman. That is what you must do as well. That's what you can do as well. Start at the very end and work your way backwards. Another way you can do this is understand your character and think about, what is my character afraid of? Or what is the weakness of my character? Again, going back to Batman, in the first film, Batman was afraid of what? He was afraid of bats himself. And he would have to overcome that fear by the end of the movie, because his entire thing was Batman was about fear in the first movie. And he had to overcome fear at the end of the movie. So Nolan used fear as the pinnacle, as the final thing Batman will face. He will develop small amounts of fear. He'll have these moments where he's fearing something, but the final thing will be his triumph over fear. And so you can do the same. Find out what your character is afraid of or what his weakness is, and have him challenge that weakness every single time in the story. Every scene he's fighting against this fear or fighting against this weakness until at the end he either wins against this weakness or he doesn't. Either he overcomes the fear or he's killed by it. Whatever. You decide what happens with him there. But at the end of the day, the final thing he does is confront the fear. You decide the outcome. So with these two tactics, whichever one you choose, you are bound to create some sort of conflict that keeps the story engaging. Now you have to understand, conflicts drive the story. If there is a scene in the story that doesn't lead towards the conflict, especially in films, this is more important in films. In books you can do these, because this is the equivalent of having filler episodes in anime. No one really cares. They're kind of fun moments, and some people enjoy them. But in movies, you cannot do this. Movies, you have a very limited time. You want to have moments that lead toward the conflict at all times. If you ever see a scene and you realize, well, this scene isn't going anywhere, either find a way to make that scene connect to the main plot or get rid of the scene. Okay? The conflicts drive the story. They're the reason the thing is progressing in the first place. So keep that in mind. Always be consistent with your conflicts. Always include them all the time. They should be the one thing that is always present in your story. And use the two tactics I gave to you to plan out your conflicts. And with that, you are bound to create a very interesting conflict progression in your story. So those were my, I think, 3 or I don't remember 4 tips. I don't know. I've been yapping for too long. I forgot how many tips I gave. But those are just my general tips from all branches of writing. You don't have to use every single tip. So the beauty of writing is they're so versatile. Not every tip works with everything. This is the same thing as don't listen to every advice, okay? If you listen and take in every single advice, you're nothing but a fool. Because a lot of advice contradicts itself. You have two different advices that don't work together, and the only thing they do is lead you into a spiral of chaos. So you don't have to use every single tip. You just have to decide what tip works for you, okay? So try out these tips, try out these practices, and hopefully your writing will increase. I pray that it does, because, I I kind of want to read some of the stuff you guys write. But at the end of the day, if the tip doesn't work, move on, try something else. I'm not a professional writer by any means. I've published something, but that doesn't make me the greatest writer in the world. All I can do is give you experiences I've had in the writing field and see if it works for you. And if it does, hooray. So yeah. Final note before I end the episode. I've been saying this for, I think, the past 3 episodes. I have a book. It's called The Human Art of Film. It's on Amazon. It's $9.99. And it's the Dead Poets Society for film lovers. If you love the Dead Poets Society, or you just love film in general, or even if you don't like any of the 2 things but you love writing, check out The Human Art of Film on Amazon. It's under Shivaya. So, check it out. And I'll see you. I don't know when I'll see you, but I'll see you in the next episode.